This is the Battle of Gaines's Mill on Legendary difficulty. So as you can see, my army is at about 1250 in size, which is interesting because on Major General, I actually had larger units going into this battle than I have on Legendary. I end up losing about 5,000, killing 32,000 of the enemy. I lose more here than I did on Major General, but I also kill more. The reason I lose more is I think I'm overly aggressive in some parts of the battle. So you can see my army, you can see my inventory. I would like to have more weapons than I do, but that's what I have. I have $74,000. I have been buying all of the good weapons that I can buy, and I'll continue to do that for the campaign. I'll continue to buy all the weapons. So I should have spent the $74,000 probably. But the biggest thing is on Legendary, with a high level of training of the enemy army, I needed to go in with bigger units, like I did on Major General. So probably 1,400 to 1,500. I could have gone to 1,600. Here's my rough conclusion. If you play the small army strategy, which I did, you're going to drive up training. Okay, the enemy has 52,000. What do we have? 22,000. Okay. All right, I can live with that. More than 2 to 1. 2 to 1 is usually pretty easy. More than 2 to 1 means it's going to be a little more difficult. I could have made this army bigger. And should have, really. Atheist built large units, but not many of them. So Ray Rivers Gaming on Legendary, he built large units and a bunch of them. So he drove up scaling. I mean, and he didn't care. I mean, he didn't even put troops, any perks into recon. I mean, he just didn't care. And his goal was, and this is what it comes down to, what's your goal? So his goal was wipe the enemy out, which he did. And for example, my goal through Gaines's Mill and Malvern Hill is just to get out of it. So to begin the mid-campaign, because my theory that I'm testing is that if I can get through Malvern Hill, and then I can start building a larger army at that point. And I end up building a really large army. But before Malvern Hill, I have a small army. Well, if you do that, which I didn't realize at the time, if you build a smaller army, you're going to drive up training. That changes how the enemy fights. If you build a larger army, the enemy is going to scale up, yes. But if you go after the enemy and wipe them out, you will drive training down. So you get to Parker's Crossroads, which is a pretty difficult battle. I'm facing all 3 stars, and I think Ray Rivers was facing 2 stars. That's a very different battle. I think Atheist faced all 3 stars. So, but again, it comes, how do you like to play? What's your style of play? Because that's a big thing. I mean, you have to play the style of play you want to play. What kind of army do you want to play with? What kind of army do you want to build? The AI is going to respond to whatever you do. How do you want to face that enemy? And for each particular battle, what's your goal? So my goal in this battle is actually just to get out of it, but then I get all wrapped up in it and I'm having a good time, so I become overly aggressive and take a good 1,000 losses that I didn't need to. So, but it's, I'm having a good time and it's fun. So, yeah, and so I've taken this ridge line position. This is a very good defensive line, and there's AP Hill, and I'm going to go down and hit him with as many volleys as I can and hopefully kill him right away. That'll be a real blow to the enemy army. And I look at the enemy army and I see 2,300, 2,500, 3 stars. Yeah, this is going to be, this is going to be tough. This is going to be brutal. So I have a 24-pound howitzer and I have a 20-pound Parrott that are going to be on this line. And then there's another 24-pound howitzer. And hopefully the advantages that the enemy has will not be too horrible because I intend to catch him in the water. And that will offset the fact that he's all, has a bunch of 3-star units and his level of training is so high. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how many volleys is it going to take to break these guys in the water, and they're fairly resilient. So it looked like, was that 3, maybe 4 shots to get the unit to retreat? And if I can get some more shots on him while he's in the water, that's just all bonus. Huge skirmisher units. Look at the size of that skirmisher unit, man. It's just crazy. So it's going to take forever to kill him, and he's going to drive me nuts. His skirmisher units are just, 3-star skirmisher units are just way too powerful. So, okay, we've hurt him. We're hurting his units in the water. The big problem with how I've done this is I needed to make my units larger like I did on Major General. So going straight to 1250 made my units too fragile. So both here and Malvern Hill, we get to the end of the battle, my units are too small. The other thing that I do is, on Major General, I did not get on this water line. I stayed back a lot more. That's much better. If you get down on this water line, that's a bad place to be. You're going to take more casualties. And my units are smaller. They can't stand to take those casualties. So I needed to play it a little more patiently, a little more cautiously. Don't get on the water line. And toward the end of the battle, I actually go forward and exchange shots with the enemy 1-for-1, and that's just a mistake. That's losing men for no purpose. But I was trying to inflict as many casualties on the enemy as possible, but that's just not the way to do it. So my point is, I would want to rethink this going into this battle for my next playthrough, and maybe rethink the battles up to this, build larger units, larger army, and inflict greater casualties on the enemy and maybe drive down training. Just kind of rethink my approach to the early campaign. Now, after Malvern Hill, I start to build units of 17, 1800, and yeah, and then the complexion of the mid-game completely changes. So I should have just probably done that sooner. But for this battle, I don't think there's, other than my attack in the end game on the right was not very smooth. It was a very clumsy attack, and it wasn't. I didn't like looking at it in the video. I didn't like the way I executed it. Good idea, poor execution. So an attack on that flank would have been okay. It just I needed to wait, bring all my forces together, and not execute that attack the way I did. So the enemy was stronger than I thought he was, and yeah, so I didn't do that well. Now this is all going well. His units are all in the water, and this is just a good time. And this is what we want. We want this over and over again, and if these units had started at, say, 1500, well, we would have even gotten more kills with each volley. So there would have been no downside. 1500, 1600, 1650 is where you start to experience the debuff for being oversized. My units are at 1250. I could have easily pushed these guys up. I don't know if I don't remember at all if scaling would have been an issue, if I had pushed my units up in size, if the enemy would have scaled up. But as you can see, if the enemy's just going to keep running forward into the water, I mean, we can just do this all day. Have plenty of ammunition, plenty of men. The units are great. 1-star units can slaughter 3-star units if the 3-star units are standing in water. So, yeah. And now the right play is get out of the river line. Stay on the hilltop. The hilltop is the place to be. Run as little as possible. because this does start to become an issue later on. The units get tired. I'm having them run back and forth a bit much. And the other thing is his artillery is very deadly. So as the enemy training level goes up, his weapons do greater damage, not only his infantry, but his artillery. And his artillery really does hurt in these battles. So, yeah, at Parker's Crossroads, I think I have one unit take 300 casualties, and it's standing halfway across the map in the woods. It's still his 10-pounder. And I can't seem to get the unit out of being detected. And, it's a 10-pounder, and it's firing from the other side of the world, and he still inflicts a lot of damage. When his training level goes up, the amount of damage he does gets to be pretty scary, especially with his long-range artillery, which is pretty much 10-pounders. So, anyway, really hate these skirmisher units. But even though you can see his numbers, and I'm chipping away at his numbers, his skirmisher units are also inflicting damage. So, yeah, I'm looking at 1088, or 10, okay. Oh, 400 and lost less than 20. Okay, that's good. Okay, so the kill ratios are absolutely terrific. I mean, couldn't be more pleased with that. I'm backing up, letting him, hopefully he's going to move 2 units into the water. And we can go ahead and hit the first one. Yeah, now he's got, he should have 3 units in the water. And hopefully he'll get 4 units in the water. And the important thing is keep your range of fire back, so that he has to get into the water to get range. So I couldn't get that 4th guy in the water if I wanted to fire on the other. Well, he's got 4 units. His 5th unit is in a position of good cover, and that's no good. So I don't want to exchange shots with him, and now I'm looking at a skirmisher. That's irritating. So I'm constantly looking at my units. I'm looking at the overall casualties, seeing the kill ratio, seeing if we're on track. Yeah, everyone's doing well, and I don't want them running all the time because they will get exhausted. And yeah, we're going to do this for quite a while. So at the end of this, my units are smaller than I want them to be. They've taken some hits, and the last battle that I'm going to build small units is Malvern Hill. And boy, I wish I'd added just a couple hundred more men per unit, because I'm not able to wipe the enemy out. My units are too fragile. I come out of Malvern Hill, some of my units are down to about 450. And I'm afraid that my units are going to start to shatter. So, yeah, I needed to give my units more heft so that they could continue to attack at the end of the battle and we'd wipe them out. So, yeah, and then up to this point, I have spent money on my units. I have spent some money on veterans to get 2-star units. I still think that's a complete waste of money. But again, it's what kind of army do you want to build? I mean, I'm watching Panda Crowd, and he's spending money. He's buying veterans for pretty much every unit in camp. But that's the kind of army he wants to build. So again, you can buy, I think that's the neat thing about this. You can build any kind of army you want, and you can, but they're going to be consequences to whatever you do. There's going to be benefits and a downside to every strategy that you can imagine. You can't do everything. So you have to figure out what it is that you want to do. Is it worth it to do the small army strategy and let training go up into the 70s on Legendary? I don't know. Maybe something more of a mixed model is a better overall plan. But yeah, something to experiment with, and I hope people will leave comments and think about the different approaches to the game and what works for them. And so, if nothing else, this has been a really interesting experiment. And then after Malvern Hill, I become more focused on inflicting losses on the enemy. But yeah, I'm thinking I go to Fredericksburg and I lose about 3,000 men, which is less than I lost on Major General. I kill more than I killed on Major General, but it's around 20,000, which is not enough. So I watch other people and they kill 35,000 or 40,000 at Fredericksburg, but they take a lot more losses. If you're trying to reduce enemy numbers, manpower pool, training level, you've got to kill more than 20,000. 20,000 doesn't do it. So um, anyway, just ideas about strategy and approach to the game and scaling. And yeah, or do you just build whatever army you want to build and heck with it? I don't think that's the right approach either. I think you need to know the effect that what you do has on the AI, and then you make the most reasonable decision you can about how you're going to approach the next battle or the campaign. So anyway, enjoy the rest of the battle, and we get out of this just fine. And which, you know, the only goal is to win the battle. In my mind, going into this, the goal is to win the battle and just get out of it. Um, Pretty good kill ratio. Units are a little small. Um, should have made the units bigger is my takeaway. Should have made the units bigger, especially for Malvern Hill. But I can tell you after Malvern Hill, these guys are going to be much larger. And the nature of the campaign is going to change drastically. Not only am I going to build bigger units, but I'm going to build a lot of them. It's going to go from the small army strategy to the mid-size army strategy to the very large army strategy over a couple of battles. So hang in there and enjoy the battle, and I'll see you at Malvern Hill.